feelings. You see humans.
They're taking away the vaccine mandate?
I just read it this morning for traveling. Yeah, because Trudeau's under a lot of pressure. I hope I'm being recorded on YouTube, but okay. Here's we go. Can you imagine if take some both out? That would be mamsha. The stock market will rally. So let's have a look over here. Today's Gemara is focusing on a shaila that we had right after the Mishnah about a machloikis between Reb Acha bar Yaakov and Reb Sheshes. Reb Acha bar Yaakov said that if a mother was Megayer, so she had one son that was Hayrasai, Shaloi B'Kedusha, V'Ledasa B'Kedusha, and another son who was Jewish, these two people are not considered brothers. And therefore, Zok Reb Acha bar Yaakov, that they're allowed to marry each other's wives. And the Gemara clarifies and says that if they're only brothers from the mother and not from the father, there would be exer. They wouldn't be able to marry each other's wives. Of course, it means after the marriage ended, whether through death or through a get. If it's brothers from the father, everybody agrees that they would be able to marry. Question is if it was brothers from the mother and the father. Rabbi Acha bar Yaakov holds that they would be mutter to marry each other's wives, and Reb Sheshes held not. And then there was another lashon which is very relevant, where Rabbi Acha bar Yaakov even allows them to marry each other's wives, even if they're only brothers minaim. And there's no gzeira at all that if you let these two brothers marry each other's wives, you might also allow two brothers to marry each other's wives if they're regular Yidden. There's no such gzeira. That would be the shita of Rabbi Acha bar Yaakov. And now the Gemara is probing into this shaila and spring rise from different prices. So we are up to the third line on Daf Tzadik Ches Amud Aleph, which is just about one block behind. Sorry, but one block behind. So Zot Tehel Gemara, Omar Rabba, Ha the Omar Rabbanon. This that the Rabbanon said, Ein Av Lemitri. A mitri does not have a father. Don't say it's only because mitriim are shotav and zima, and you never ever know who's the right father. Which means even in Mitzrayim, Father's Day is very mysterious. Which incidentally is this Sunday. The lo yadiyah, because we don't know who the father is. Aval yadiyah, but if we knew who the father was, maybe Chashina, you would say Yesh Avlamitri. Even if you know for a fact who the father of this person is, Loi Chashinon, we're not Choshish. How do I know that? Because we just learned yesterday, Shnei Achim Te'umim. We learned yesterday when you have two brothers who are identical twins, so you know for sure that the Tipa Achas Hoya, Menachla Koloshtayim. So we know for sure that they share the same father, the Katani Seifa, and the Seifa, the Brisa that we learned yesterday said, Loi Chaylton, V'loi Miyabmin. They're not considered brothers. Shemamina Afkure Rachmona Lazari. The Rebbeinu Shalom perceives the zera of a goy like of a behim. Besar Chamorim Besarim, Bezirmas Susim Azirmasim. So let's see Rashi on the second line from the top. Hadam Rabbanon ein avol mitri. Even if you can't say about this child that he's a new person because he's a ger. So when this child was born, the child was Jewish. So there is no katan shenoilad. The yesh lo she'er min ha'ein kishar Yisrael gomer. He's considered his mother's son because she gave birth to him when she was Jewish. Nevertheless, we don't consider him related to his father. And again, it's not because it's Stufizimo, it's because Be'etzem, the Torah was mafkir, the zera of a mitri, of a goy. That's right. So it's fascinating, the halacha l'maisa that we learn out of these things. Lamoshel. This is one of the shells that's brought up. What if someone is an antique collector? He collects artifacts. Is he allowed to trade in mummies? There's a market. People buy mummies, right? It's a museum piece. Is he allowed to buy mummies? So there are those who bring a raya that from Besar Chamoyim Besorum, we have a raya that you could buy a mummy because they're considered like behemoths, just like Zirma Susum Zirmasum, Chamoyim Besorum. So the person more matter is someone who trades in artifacts to buy a mummy. And you know a mummy. Right? But the Torah considers it like a chamor. The same way you're allowed to buy and sell. I'm not talking about Tumah. I'm not talking about Tumah.
It's not exactly the same thing because it carries when the viator.
We're not talking about Tumah. We're talking about Hifkir Lazarim. The Rebbeinu treats a goy like a behemoth.
It's not exactly. It's not exactly because they have Timus mess.
A goy doesn't have Tumas Mes. With their bonnet, maybe there's no Tumas Mes by goy. A goy is Tumas Mes. I don't think so. No, I don't think the goy is Tumas Mes at all. Maybe their bonnet.
He doesn't come to, but he's the father. Is this only to the father or to the mother? This lack of relationship.
Well, we're talking about even in a case where it was Hayrasai Shaloi B'Kedusha, V'laidosai B'Kedusha, which means when the mother gave birth to him, she was already Jewish. So then Rashi says there is She'ere. So he is considered the son of his mother. Nevertheless, we don't consider this
She was pregnant.
when she became Jewish.
The sisters from the father wouldn't be us.
That's exactly what the Rav is saying. It's exactly what Rav is saying. Toshma, the Amar Rabbi Yosy said, Maisa b'niftayim hager. There was a ger whose name was Niftayim. Shenasa eishes achav mi'imay. So once again, we're looking to see whether or not someone is allowed to marry his brother's wife if they're Hayrasai Shaloi B'Kedusha. So Maisa b'niftayim hager. Shenasa eishes achav mi'imay. He married the wife of his brother, and they shared a mother. This mice came in front of the Chum. And they said, "Ein ishus lager." A ger has no ishus. What does it mean? Well, a ger the kaddish hachanami latavsa b'kedushin. You're saying a ger his kedushin is not toifus? That doesn't make sense. He's a regular Yisrael. About this kedushin is toifus. Elaima, what they must have told Niftayim Ager was ein isur eishes ach lager. There's no isur eishes ach lager. Now let's see exactly what the situation was. We know what the psak was. Ein isur eishes ach lager. But what was the case on which they passed this? Mylab, the nosva ach kishu ger, that the brother after he became Jewish was mekadosh a woman, and nevertheless his brothers allowed to marry the wife of his brother. Why? Because we hold like Rabach, that we're not geyser. So you have a right to Rabacha against interpretations. The Nosva Kishoevit Chavim. They were only matir the ger to marry his brother's wife if his brother only married her while he was a guy. So there was never really a kedushin. And Rashi adds, Umishinis Gayer Lo Yada. He didn't have any relations with this woman. Therefore, kedushin. But if it was a kedushin, maybe we hold like interpretations. Dr. Gemara, why would we need a psak to tell us that if someone made kedushin when he was a goy, that kedushin is not chal? That's poshut that the brother would be able to marry his brother's wife because it wasn't really his brother's wife. He was never married to. Dr. Gemara. Mao the tema ligzar kishu evit auto kishu ger. You might think they were married als goyim, so we should answer her even though he becomes a ger now. because of Xera, because people are then going to marry each other's wives. Kamash Malon, that you're not Geyser. Tashma. The difference between what? Oh, that's a good point. I don't know. I don't know. That's a good question. That's a good question. That's a good question. The only thing I can think of, and I don't know if it's true at all, is Pshita is something that you might ask if a Mishnah or an Amoira says a halacha. Here, this is a psak halacha. So in a way, I don't even understand the kasha so much. What happened was Niftaim Ger married, and they went to the Rabbanon. They asked the Rabbanon a question, so the Rabbanon have to answer. You can't ask a kasha pshita on someone to ask the Rabban Shaila. You ask the Rabban Shaila, and the Rav Paskin says pshita. The Rav has to Paskin the Shaila. Someone asked the Rav. So it's a little. It could be that's where the Gemara used the lashon of Ma'ila member, but I don't know. Tashma, the Amar ben Yasayin said, Kishalachti, maybe he's the son of Hussein. Kishalachti lekarche hayam. When I went traveling overseas, matzasi ger echad shenosa eishes achav me'im. And this is an exact repeat of the shaila that we just mentioned a moment ago with Niftaim ger. Amarti loy, I asked him, Bini mir shecha, who said that you could marry your brother's wife? Amar li, he told me, what are you talking about? Harai isha v'shiva banel. I remember years ago, there was a case where there was a woman, also a Gyoris, who had 7 children, who were Magayer with her. Al Safsel Yoshev Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva sat on this bench right here. V'Omar, and he said 2 things. V'Omar Shnei Dvorim. One related to our Shaila, and one seemingly not related. And he said, Ger noise eishes achav me'imai. A ger is allowed to marry the wife of his brother, even if they share a mother. I'm sorry? Because that's precisely where the shaila is. If we said yesterday, if they only share a father, everybody agrees. Saira Bacha, and even if Shesh agrees that's mutter. The machloikus is only if they share a mother, because people know that they're real brothers. By a father, they don't necessarily know. But let's look at Rashi. Rashi is very explicit. No, we assume he's not. But let's have a look. Let's have a look in Rashi, because Rashi says it's beautiful. And this is in the first lashon. The asir lechlufa b'Yisrael. Someone would say that if 2 brothers that shared a mother and they married each other's wives, people would also allow 2 Jewish brothers to marry each other's wives. But if it's only from the father, do you say, if it's from the father and the mother, Rashi says. So I'm on the Rashi right after the Mishnah on Daf Tzadik Zayin and Beis. Basar Aviv Shadin and Lei. Do you look at it like they're sons of this father? Do you say that if they're both brothers from the mother and the father, people normally say, oh, these are the 2 boys of Mr. Smith. And therefore, people are going to know, why are we allowing them to marry each other's wives? Everybody knows that a ger does not have that relationship. Once he becomes a ger, it changes. He's a new person, and therefore he's not in the siachas after his father. You always assume that when a woman has 2 children, you know for sure they're the children of the mother, but you never ever know that they share the same father. So that's the primary difference of Rashi between sons that share a father and sons that share a mother. And therefore, everybody agrees, if the sons only share a father, everybody agrees that they could marry each other's wives, and no one's going to think because of that 2 Jewish brothers can marry each other's wives. But if we allow 2 goyim who share a mother, where we know they're really blood relatives, if we allow them to marry each other's wives, we're afraid that two regular brothers will marry each other's wives. So that is the main shiloh that we have over here. So the rise that we're all going to bring, of course, are only when they share a mother, because that's where the machlokes is. Okay, so let's see what the Gemara says right there. So now we have this ger who said, I'm allowed to marry my brother's wife, because I remember Rabbi Kiva Paskin such a case with a geyeris with 7 children. Rashi says, Isha b'shiva b'nei. I'm sorry, that's earlier. That's earlier. Isha geyeris b'shiva b'nei shehitir lehen Rabbi Kiva Lisa ish es eshes achiv. There were 7 brothers, and Rabbi Kiva allowed them to marry each other's wives. Okay, and it was Isha v'shiva b'nei. So it's very specific that we're talking about that they shared a mother. Yet Rabbi Kiva still said, "I'm not going to be geyser to 2 regular Jewish brothers." That's the first thing that Rabbi Kiva said. The second thing that he said was the Omar, and he said, "Vahi devar Hashem el yoina she'nis lemar." Oh, today's going to be a good day. We're all going to be successful. We're all learning Mafti Yoina. So today we all get Mafti Yoina. Today's going to be a good day. In order not to mess up my projection, please nobody playing stocks today. Okay, so Zok to Gemara. So it says, Sheinis Dibra Imoy Shechina. The Torah spoke to Yoda only a second time. It doesn't say Hashem once again appeared to Yoda. It says the second time, which is a little bit not the normal way. So we dash from there that only twice did HaKadosh Baruch Hu speak to Yoda. Shalishis loy dibra imoy Shechina. He never was spoken to again. And then there's a whole shiloh. What did he do wrong? Because he didn't want to give Ninvei Musar. He had a very good reason for not wanting to give Ninvei Musar. He was protecting the covenant of Klal Yisrael. Katanimios. We learned a kolpanim in the first story that we're talking about. Ger noisa eshes achiv meimai. My lab, the nasa achiv kishu ger. Let's say it's speaking that the brother married this woman when he was already a ger, so it's a good kedushin. So you have a raya against Reb Sheshes to Reb Chia. But the marriage happened when he was a guy. Frank Gemara Mailam, remember exactly the same child before. So once again, the Achronim ask, this is literally an identical repeat of the previous shtickle. So what new here did the Gemara come up with? So I saw 2 pshatim. One shot I saw is sometimes if the Gemara doesn't like the teretz to a kasha, the Gemara will ask the same kash again. Maybe this time they'll come up with a better teretz. That's one shot. But the other shot is, in the previous case, it was a shaila b'di'evet. Ben Yasyan was married, and he wanted to know if he could stay that way. Here we have a raya from Reb Kiva who said noisen even lechatchila. So it's a bigger raya because you see even lechatchila you could do it. Not only do we not separate them, if they got married, we allow them to get married lechatchila. They approached this ger. Let's say he was a Talmud Chacham. Let's say he was a Choshev Yid, and he was quoting from Rabbi Kiva to reassure us, in fact, that he's allowed to be married to this woman. But can you trust even a Rov to paskin on something when it's very, very relevant to his own situation? This is very relevant to his own marriage. You don't believe someone, a Rav has known him in such a case, because the Amar of Abba, Amar of Huna, Amar Rav, Kol Talmud Chacham, Shemoyer Halacha, Uba, he paskins Halacha. Im Koydemai so Amar, if he paskin this Shaila before it was relevant to him, so he was paskining as someone who is objective, who has no negias, then Shoymin Loy, then you could accept his psak. But V'im Lav, if he's only paskining because it's a question that's relevant to him, ain't Shoymin Loy. You can't listen to him. So how is this guy Nemon to say this psak to allow him himself to stay married to his wife? Zok to Gemara, we have a couple of ways you can get around this. I'm sorry? Maybe the Bezin Paskin. Over there, the Bezin Paskin. It wasn't only place of Boston. So Zok Gemara, Iba Yisema, you could say Moira Bahaya. In fact, the ger had already learned the Shaila even before he got married. Maybe that was the case. So he was talking to Paskin even before he got married, before it was relevant. Or Iba Yisema, Mishum Deka Amar Hare Isha B'Shiva Banel, which Rashi says Raya Shel Kodim L'Chein Hevi. Clearly, he's being a raya that this was Paskin before it was relevant to him. And we say, since he's believed Legabi the other Maisa, Huadin, he's believed Legabi this Maisa. So there's a big machalikus Rishonim as to why a Talmud Chacham can't paskin for himself. Rashi says, and it's not Rashi here, it's the most of Rashi that I don't have in this Gemara, but I have it in the Art Scroll. Rashi says it's because you simply believe he's going to corrupt the law, since it's relevant to him. And the Ritva asks Kasher and Rashi, how you talking? You're going to be Chosher at Talmud Chacham for corrupting the law? Not Shaykh to say such a thing. A. B is, if that's the reason, what helped the smear the last terror to the Gemara, Shiny Hacha de Kamer Maisa Chwina Bada. Since you said over another Maisa, so I believe him here. If he's corrupt, he's corrupt. What does it make a difference if he's quoting something else? So the Ritva learns Avada, we're not Choshish that the Talmud Chacham is going to corrupt the law. But we do say that everyone's judgment can be clouded if he's relevant. If it's relevant, he's in the Gebadah. So we're not chas v'sholom choshish that he's bedaflik in a lie to matter himself, but we're choshish that he won't have such clear judgment. Therefore, as Dr. Ritva, this teretz makes perfect sense. Since we know he's thinking clearly, he quoted other things perfectly accurate, we'll assume that he has clarity in this sugya. So there is a shayla. A Rav comes home, and his wife has a shayla in the kitchen, milk filled to meat, and she asks him, is it mutter? So he's very in the game with over, because if he passes that shayla, that it's usher, there goes the supper. He doesn't have supper tonight. So can a Rav pass such a shayla? So there's actually a lot of talk in the Akronim how a Rav deals with these things. So right off the bat, if it doesn't require his psak, his shikul adas, he could show his psak in the sefer, which is 99% of situations. He could show you a Pesach, he could show you a Machaber, he could show you one of the Noise Kalim or someone Friedrich who passed in that way. There for sure there's no issue of him passing for himself. The only issue is if he's passing for himself a Shaila that he's using his own shikul adas. What's the rest of the shach?
It's been a businessman. It started and then he came to Belgium and started to Talmud, and then they passed it against him. They didn't know who he was that he was shot. But then he asked, can you mention this? I think I was from Leipzig to Shach, and I passed him for some.
I said it myself, but I didn't know. See the years.
He could have laughed him so much when said such a thing without that.
Wow, beautiful story. Now the Chazon holds that a Rav could even paskin for himself. A Rav could even paskin for himself because once someone has a star smicha, he's never to paskin himself, except if there's shaychat involved, and he knows when to recuse himself if there's shaychat involved. Omar Bar. So it's a beautiful story. Yeah. Omar Bar. Mar said, so we're going back into this question of Yoina. And we learned that Shenis Dibra Imai, Rekiva said Shenis Dibra Imai, Shechina, but Shlish is like Dibra Imai. In fact, tomorrow, is that true? Vaksiv, we have a pasuk in Malachim that says, Hu Heshiv Eskavol Yisrael, and it was talking about one of the kings of Yisrael, it's Yeravim ben Yoash. Yeravim ben Yoash, Rashi says, brought Klal Yisrael back, Milavoi Chamos, Ajam Harava, Kidvar Hashem, Asher Diber Biad Abdo, Yoina ben Amosai Nabi. So you see clearly that Yoina had additional nevuos. Ravina, all Rabbi Kiva meant was Al Iske Ninvei Kamar. When it says that Hashem didn't speak to Yoina anymore, it means he didn't speak to Yoina about Ninvei, but on other things he did speak. Rab Nachman ben Gamar Hachik Amar Kidvar Hashem Asher Diber Biad Abdo Nabi. It doesn't mean there was a special nevuah directly said to Yoina regarding taking back Eretz Yisrael. Rather, Kishem Shenepach LeNinvei Meira LeToiva. Just like Ninveh turned over and they did tshuva, they went from Ra to Toiva. That's all we meant as per the Nevuah. It's referring to the previous Nevuah that it could change over from Ra to Toiva. And there are those who say, Vosabes Rabbi Kiva put these two halachas together, the halacha of the Giyaris with her 7 children and the Shaila of the Navi, because once again, the same way Gerish and his guys could cut into Dami, so too, someone who does tshuva, everything's Nisabech Meirel Toiva, this is another mention. The problem that Tosfos asks is even in the parasha of Yoina Navi, after the whole thing happened, and then the Kohen died, Hashem came again to Yoina Navi and told him, "Don't here you're worried, you feel bad about a tree that died, and you don't want me to feel bad about killing out such a big city like Nineveh." So you see, in fact, there was another nevuah that was directly related to Nineveh. So Tosfos answers that nevuah that we're referring to is Hashem telling us the future. Hashem giving a musar, that's not the nevuah that Rabbi Kiva meant.
Hashem can tell directly
I think so. I don't know nevuah that well. I don't know how it works. Oh, the Malach. No, it wasn't Malach.
Clearly, it says the Malach stopped coming. Period. Right? It's over.
Tashma. Ger shahaya leidase b'kedusha. So once again, let's go back to our question. If they share a mother, are they allowed to marry each other's wives? Ger shahaya leidase b'kedusha v'rasa shalei b'kedusha. Yesh la sharaim. We consider that there's a relation through the mother, but ve'ele shara'ab. But there's no relation if they share a father. Ketzad, what is the case? Nasa achaysai mina'im. If he married his sister with whom he shares a mother, Yosy, he has to divorce her. But mina'ab, if he marries a sister with whom he only shares a father, Yikayim, he can keep her. How about achays ha'av min ha'im? How about your father's sister, your aunt, but your father shares a mother with that sister? Yosy, because once again, anything to do with aim is a problem. Rashi says, Gzeira mishum achaysay min ha'im. Kidamarin. It's all about a gzeira of achaysay min ha'im. Even if we let you marry your aunt, who's only a sister to your father through the mother. But mino'ab, what if your father has a sister with whom he only shares a father? Yikayim, you're allowed to marry that woman. Achaysay aim mino'im. What about your mother's sister with whom she shares a mother with? Yosy. Once again, any relationships that are related to the mother is what we're most concerned with. Na'av, Rav Meir omer Yosy, v'chachamim omer Yakai. Rav Meir hold Yosy. Rashi says, Hoyel v'ika tzadein, even though they only share a father, but we're talking about mothers here. But the chachamim say Yakayim because it's a relationship with which they share a father, and that's not a relationship that's going to be prohibited. So you're a Meir omer. Kol erba shehi mishum she'er ha'aim, anything that has anything to do with mother, Yosy. Mishum av, if it's because of the father, Yikai. Umuter be'eshes achiv. Let me look at the Bach. Umuter be'eshes achiv. Uve eshes achiav. He's muter be'eshes achiv. Uve eshes achiav. So we're looking at eshes achiv, right? That's what we're focused on. Umuter be'eshes achiv. The shar kol harayis and all other arayis are mutaris loy are going to be muter. What are we speaking about when we say shar kol harayis? Lu yisuye eshes ha'av. He's even allowed to marry his father's wife because again we're saying that he has no yichus to his father. Nasa isha udita. What if he married a woman and her daughter? So Rashi says, Ager de Olmakai. We're speaking about a regular ger. We're not speaking about brothers anymore. A regular ger who married Shenasa b'hiyosa ovet gachavim. Before he became Jewish, he married a woman and her daughter. V'nisgayu imoy, and his 2 wives, mother and daughter, were megayer with him. So the halacha is koinis achas umoitzi achas. The Gemara says. He's allowed to stay married to one, but the other one he has to divorce. And Rashi says it's also a gzeira. The leilesi lemishri be Yisrael isho bita. We don't want in a case where they're all Jewish to marry isha bita. Even though here once they become gerim, they're no longer related, but it's a gzeira. And then it says lechatchila lo yichnatz, which is a mystery what that means. Because it can't mean Nasa Ishu Bita Konis Echad Umoitzi Achas, because even with the Evid you can't keep it. So what does it mean? The Gemara is going to explain later. Mesa Ishtoi, a ger whose mother died, Mutter B'chamoisai, he's allowed to marry his mother-in-law. The Iko Detani, there are those who learn, Asr B'chamoisai, the ger is not allowed to marry his mother-in-law. Katani Mias, we learned earlier in this long brayta that we quoted, Mutter B'eshesachim, he's allowed to marry his brother's wife. Once again, you have a raya through Acha against Psheshes. My lab the Nosva Achiv Keshuger. Zok Gemara the same teretz all over again. The Lord did Nosva Keshuger B'Techavim. My lememra. So what's the chiddush? The same thing as before. Ma'al the Tema Ligzer Keshuger B'Techavim Otu Keshuger Kamash Malon. So we literally had the same kasha 3 times with the same teretz 3 times, just from different sources. Omar Mar. So now let's go back and analyze the brisa that we just quoted. Nosa Isha Ubita. He married a woman and her daughter while they were goyim, and then they were megayer together. So technically nobody's related. So technically they should be able to stay married. Nevertheless, koinus achas umoitzi achas, because we're afraid if we let him remain married to the mother and daughter, a regular Yisrael will marry a regular mother and daughter, which is an Isser curse. But lechatchila lo yichnas. What does it mean lechatchila lo yichnas? Hashta we just said afuke mafuk. He has to divorce one of these 2 women. So lechatchila miboy. So of course lechatchila he can't take them in. Zok Gemara hasam kol. We're not referring to the case of a mother and daughter. We're referring to hasam. What does hasam mean? So Baruch Hashem, we have Rashi. I'm not sure how Rashi, whose shot he got, but Rashi says over here, hasam koi. Could be it's not this Rashi, it's the other Rashi. V'hachi gomer hach the Amar Rabbanon Yekayim. I was here. Was there? Hach the Amar Rabbanon Yekayim. There's a Rashi hach the Amar Rabbanon. I just have to see where it is. Hach the Amar Rabbanon Yekayim. So Rashi says Kigoy nachoisai mina av v'chavrusa. The sister with whom he shares a father with, which we said in those cases, he's allowed to remain married to her. He's allowed to marry her. Nevertheless, lechatchila lo yichnas. Lechatchila, he shouldn't marry them, but if he's already married to them, he can stay married. Mesa ishtoi, if his wife dies, mutter b'chamoisai, he's allowed to marry his mother. The ika detani, there are those who learn also b'chamoisai. So there seems to be a machlokes by a ger. If he was megayer and his wife was megayer and his mother-in-law was megayer, so they're all no longer related officially. There's still a shaila if he's allowed to marry his chamoisha or not. What is the machlokes? The Gemara, it's totally the machlokes that we learned a little bit earlier. Chada Rabbi Shmuel, the Chada Rabbi Kiva. Man the Asar, the man that holds that it's Asar even for a ger to marry chamoisha after his wife dies. Is Rabbi Shmuel the Amar chamoisha lachamisa b'isur kaima. Rabbi Shmuel learned that even after his wife dies, there's still a chiyuv shreifa for someone to marry his mother-in-law. So since it's very chamer by a Yisrael, we're geyser by a ger as well that he shouldn't marry his mother-in-law even after his wife dies. And therefore, the gabe ger gazru berabon. Uman the shari and the mandam who allows a ger to marry his mother-in-law after his wife dies holds like Rabbi Kiva the Amar chamoisai la'achar mitzah kolish le'yisura. And if you remember, we said that there's no chiyuv shreifa, it's still osur, but there's no longer a chiyuv shreifa. And therefore, since after his wife dies, the level of chiyuv drops because there's no longer a chiyuv shreifa, therefore the gabe ger like goes to berabon. That's why by a ger the rabbanon weren't geyser, and the Gemara and the rabbanon allow a ger to marry his mother-in-law after his wife dies.
You don't allow Gary to do things that are us in Israel because it looks bad that you couldn't do this when you were a boy, but now you can do it when you're a guy.
But this he was able to do when he was a ger. When he was a goy, he was allowed to marry his mother-in-law after his wife dies. There's no prohibition for a goy.
In lifetime, they can only do it here.
A goy is allowed to marry his wife and his mother-in-law. It's not a problem.
Goy's allowed to
Yeah. So this is not a case where it became more lenient.
Because he's a liar.
Although there is a case, it's a little complicated, but there is a case where you could argue where there would be a leniency. The Tosfos discussed this. But in this particular case, I don't know if that would apply because it's only becoming more stringent. Okay, let's see the Mishnah weiter. This Mishnah is complicated, not the Mishnah, but the Gemara after it, and we need pictures. I succumb to Dovi's advice that you need pictures. No Reuben and Shimon's and Leah's and Rachel's over here. This time we need pictures. So I have pictures. I brought my article. So Chamesh Noshim Shenis Arvu V'lo they say it. The hospital was understaffed with nurses, and they didn't properly label 5 children that were born to 5 different women in the maternity ward, and now we have 5 children. We don't know which one belongs to which mother. And what happened is they were all boys. They all grew up, and they all got married. Umesu, and they all died. Now, each of these women who have a child that they don't know if it's their child or if it's someone else's child, each of these women have other children, other sons that they know are their sons. So now you have 5 women who fall to Yibum, but we don't know who they fall to Yibum to because we don't know which one of these 5 families belong to them, right? So because of that, they're zakuk to Yibum to one of 5 people, and they don't know who it is. So the halacha is arba chayotz and lachas. So there's 5 families. Out of the 5 families, take 4 of them, and they should make chalitza to this one woman. We don't know who she belongs to. So let's think of it. Once they all do chalitza on her, then she could marry the 5th one because Mamanashik. Either the 5th one is really the right family, right, and he's allowed to make Yibum on her. And if he's the wrong family, it doesn't matter because she already got chalitza from anybody else involved. Does that make sense? No.
No, the reason why it doesn't make sense is because you got chalitza from him too.
No, it says 4 out of the 5. 4 of the vadais give chalitza. The 5th guy could do Yibum. He could do chalitza too, but he could even do Yibum because mimanashik. Either this is the right pink that this pink is the almana of his real brother. Even if it's not the almana of his brother, she's going to be mutter l'shuk already because she's already received chalitza from the other 4.
I don't understand.
There were 5 families, and they each had sons, right? And then these same 5 families, the 5 mothers gave birth, and the 5 boys that were born together. Well, they had the families were big families, but in one night in the maternity ward, all these 5 mothers gave birth, and those 5 children got mixed up, and all these 5 children were married, and they all died, and left their wives over as almanas without any children, which means these 5 women all are mechuyev to do Yibum. They all have zika, but their zika is to one of 5 men, and they don't know which one of the 5 families their zika is to. So if 4 of the families give her chalitza, right, then the only chance is that maybe she still has a zika because the 5th family didn't give her the chalitza yet. But the 5th family could do Yibum to her, give them money. Either it's Yibum, she's the right woman, and she's not the right woman, so it's like marrying a stranger because she already has her release because she already got chalitza from the 4 other people that might be the right young. Make sense? I think it's still staring at me.
It makes sense, but I thought that, there's 1 or so games to introducing theaters. So how do you,
So he gave me Makalisher before. Like Myra before.
Why do you think it doesn't make sense?
No, it makes sense. I want to make sure everyone's healthy up, which is a little complicated. So the halach is arba chotz and lachas ve'echad miyab ma'isa, and one could make Yibum. And then you do the same process with the other 4 women, except you don't have one person do the Yibum on all 5, and the other 4 give chalitza to all 5. You let each one marry 1 woman. So therefore it says, who ushloisha choyotzin. Then the person who did Yibum on the first one will give chalitza together with 3 others. So there's still 4 to the next one. Nimtzu, what's going to happen is arba chalitzos v'yibum l'cholachas v'achas. Each one of these almanas will get 4 chalitzas and 1 yibum. Why does it have to be that way? But Rashi tells us because, or actually the Gemara is going to tell us. The Gemara is going to tell us really they can all get chalitza from everybody. But if they do yibum, maybe Hashem will make it prove that each one got the yibum from the right person that they were supposed to get. One thing is clear, that before the one brother does yibum, the other four had to have done chalitza, because otherwise he's in a dangerous situation. You for sure can't do yibum first, and then the other four come and do chalitza, because the kapaga b'yavama l'shuk. If this is not his yavama, then he's being over alav of l'siyeh shem esachutah. So first the chalitzas are done, and then the yibums are done. So first everybody exchanges chalitzas, and then the yibums happen. Zok Gemara, my who v'shloisha chotzim lachas. Why did the guy who did yibum on the first? Why do we automatically disqualify him from doing yibum on the other women? The loitema liyabminu chad l'chulu. You don't say one person could do all 5 yibums and everybody else will do chalitza, which is also a safe bet. Rather, lakol chad v'chad miyabim chada. Why? Dilma misrami l'gedei. Maybe if they each do yibum to one woman, maybe we'll be lucky and they all got the right woman. Here's where it gets a little bit complicated. Miksasan achin u'miksasan shenachin. What if some of them are brothers and some of them aren't brothers? So let's look at the Bach's girsa to this, but I'll make it very simple. Miksasan achin u'miksasan she'enachin ha'achin cholten v'she'enachin miyabim. What does this mean? My comer, what are we talking about? And even after we read Reb Safra, you're still not going to know what we're talking about, but I'll use the picture. Reb Safra, Hachi Kamar, Miksasan Achin Mino Av, Miksasan Achin Mino Aim. Some of them are brothers from the father, some of them are brothers from the mother. So Achin Mino Aim, someone who's a brother from the mother, cannot do Yibum, they do Cholten. Achin Mino Av Miyab. So let's just look at the picture instead of trying to go through Rashi and explaining everything. I'm just going to take the easy way out. And we'll use the picture. So we are on Daf Tzadik Ches Tzadik Tesam Aleph, right? Sorry, where are we up to? 98B4. Thank you. 98. I know I've seen here. I was here before. So 98B4. So here's the picture. It's a very, very simple picture. What you happen is you have what's that? You can't see this way. It's confusing enough just for focusing on. So the first thing is the 5 women that were in the hospital in the maternity ward that night that got mixed up are these 5 women. So let's take the easy ones, the easy cases first. Here's the easy case. You had 3 of the families are the same as the families discussed in the Mishnah. They had each of them had sons that we knew were their sons, and then they each had children that fateful night in the maternity ward, and we don't know out of these 3 sons, we don't know if they belong to these people or maybe belong to these people. We don't know who they belong to. So that's exactly what we learned until now. But we're just throwing one more little complication into the mix. But the little complication that we're throwing into the mix is as follows. The 5th couple, because there's a father and mother, the 5th couple here, we'll just look at this nucleus over here. The 5th couple is Reuven and Rachel. They had a son Yosef, and we know for sure Yosef is their child. But what happened is after Reuven and Rachel split up, Reuven married Chana, and Chana was one of the women in the maternity ward that night. So you have an almana here that might be zokuk to Yibum to Yosef because they share a father, they share Reuben, right? So this woman is the woman that Yosef could do Yibum with. It's the only woman that Yosef could do Yibum with, right? All these other women, Yosef could marry once they get a chalitza, but if they don't get a chalitza, he can't marry them. But if they do get a chalitza, he could marry them. But then Yosef's mother also remarried after they split up, and they also had a child. This woman, even if she got a chalitza from everybody, Yosef could never ever marry this woman. Why can Yosef never ever marry this woman? Because this is achoisoi, this is achiv me'imai. Achiv me'imai, there's no heter yibamam. Not only no heter yibamam, even if she gets a chalitza and she's completely free, you're never ever allowed to marry a woman who was once married to your brother if you share a mother. So that's where this is complicated. Because in this case, Yosef cannot do yibam to any one of these 5 women, because one of them might be the wife of his brother with whom he shares a mother.
You can't do yibum to anyone you ever shared a mother with?
Only if you share a father. No, if you share a father and a mother, you could. But if you don't share a father, you can't do evil. In this case, he only shares a mother, so for sure he can't do evil. And since he can't do Yibum, Yosef will not be able to do any Yibum. So the Mishnah had a case where everyone can do Chalitza up to 4 and do Yibum on 1. In this case, Yosef can't do Yibum on anybody, right? So that means right away, one of these women is going to get left out because you have 5 brothers and you have 5 women, but one can't marry either of them. So what are you going to do with the extra? So Zok the Gemara, the halacha is, if mitzas and achin mino'ah, if some brothers are only brothers to the deceased because they share a father, or they also share a father, and Yosef, who has a problem because one of these almanas is the wife of a man who he only shared a mother with, so no matter what, he can't be boiled this woman. So then achin mino'ah mecholtzin. So this Yosef, he could only, this, I should actually keep this up on the thing. So this Yosef, he could not do Yibum on anybody. He just has to do Chalitza on everybody. And because of that, he does Chalitza. So therefore, Achin Mino'ain are only Chalitz, but Achin Mino'av Miyabmin, which means either one of these brothers are going to have to marry 2 women, or one of these women will just get Chalitza from everybody and walk free. Okay, what happens if it's Miktsasan Kaihanim u'Miktsasan she'ein Kaihanim? Some of them are Kaihanim and some of them are not Kaihanim. So let's look at Rashi all the way to the bottom. Miktsasan shel Vadoyin v'Taruvasan Kaihanim. Some of these brothers are Kaihanim u'Miktsasan she'ein Kaihanim. Then again, Cholton l'Kulon. You have to do Chalitza. Everybody has to do Chalitza and everybody. There's no Yibum happening here. The Efshur Lahem Yabim, they can't do Yibum. Why? Hoyel v'Cholta are ba chalitzos, since each woman would have received 4 chalitzos. Shema ha'echad ha'choylitz lo ha'yavama. It's possible that one of these 4 people who did chalitza on this woman before you wanted to make ibum might have been the real yavam, which means this woman is a chalutza. A kohen is not allowed to marry a chalutza. The chalitzos are chalitza the chaynasaba. So if there's kaihanim involved, Kohanim cannot do Yibum at all to any of these women. Once again, they'll have to only do Chalitza, which means not all 5 women will get into a Yibum case, unless one of the other brothers will do Yibum on multiple women, but otherwise they won't all be able to match up one person. So Nachabal, Miksasan, Kohanim, Miksasan, Shein Kohanim, Cholchim, Shein Kohanim, I'm sorry, Miksasan, Shein Kohanim, Kohanim, Cholchim, and Shein Kohanim, Yabim. The Kohanim can only do Chalitza. And the non-Kohanim who don't have a problem of marrying a chalutza, they can do Yibum. Miksas and Kohanim. No, we're not talking about the deceased. We're talking about the brothers that are going to be doing the Yibum. Yeah. Miksas and Kohanim, Miksas and Achim. What if you have both? So out of these 5 brothers, you had Yosef who was Achim and Aim, the one of the women, but one of these guys was a Kohen, right? One of these guys was a Kohen. So Viter, he can't do Yibum on anybody. So again, all those people who, for some reason or other, can't do the Yibum, they'll just do Chalitza. Believe me, Gewalt. So that takes one level of complication away. We have pictures, but we're still sticking to the complication. Oh, it's 6:52, so it means we have to stop here, and we're still a block behind. Okay, that's it. Today I started, I think, at 6:03. Tomorrow I got a beer, and we have to start at 6 o'clock. Because that extra 3 minutes could have got us another 4 or 5 lines. So we'll be mamshach tomorrow. Again, I don't want to rush through the Gemaras that are complicated. I'll wait till we get easy Gemaras to rush through, and eventually they'll come. But it won't be tomorrow.
The other way. So
I'm sorry.
The complicated Gemaras. I heard Mayo Kai's mother was